But Caesar's Gallic Wars isn't some old piece of fustian that, you know, if you're an elitist, you read to plug into the ancient world. It establishes the principle that a weaker force can whip a larger force by dividing.
And being better prepared.
Yeah. You can set the larger force against one another. And you see that in schooling, the ordinary classes are set against one another by constant, meaningless testing and small, inconsequential prizes being given to the people who test best and wiggle their hands in the air, so that the ordinary classes are divided for a period of 12 years through meaningless competition. I noticed when I was in basic training in the Army and was told that I was going to learn in 3 hours how to take a rifle with 57 parts of blindfold and put it back together. I knew that I could not do that. I knew I could not do that. And yet, in a room with 500 other scared young people, we all did it. And they didn't say, and he finished first. You know, the important thing is, what do we learn that's enhanced by competition? I mean, what real do we learn? It gets in the way because now your rank becomes a factor rather than the quality of what you've learned. I made these ideas clear to 13-year-olds at all times and found that after about 90 days, they became as addicted to ideas and the whys of things as I was. Whenever a new idea would emerge in the classroom, this is quite literally true, I would grab a piece of chalk and write it on the wall. I'd climb a ladder and write it on the ceiling. Inside of that first 90 days, there were hundreds of digests of ideas everywhere, on the floors when there was no room left, front, back, sides of the room. I had world maps and national maps, and I could leap up and point to the origin of the idea as we know it, or simultaneously they came. As I say, it was roughly 90 days when classes that were considered the stupidest, people who'd never eaten off a tablecloth in their life, were actually, they were hot to talk about ideas. We couldn't have that. How could we maintain the social order and the economic order if we had people who became fully alive when they were young and could get up when they're knocked down? You know, I think a lot of the problem, it's very easy to assign this completely to sinister motives, and there are certainly sinister motives at work, but I think part of it is the problem of how we would manage a society that didn't require managing. And I don't think anyone's been able to solve that problem. The early America probably did it better than anyone we have easy access to.
Well, because I think it's not about anarchy. Anarchy is just a void or a vacuum of government. It's about being autonomous. And if you take away the government, it doesn't automatically give people critical thinking or the self-reliance that they need and the compassionate communication that they need to work together with other people to achieve goals.
Right.
So, in your explanation of how you learned the most powerful lesson of doing the impossible, you knew you couldn't do that. And after an hour or so, you had just done something that you knew you couldn't do.
I knew I couldn't do it.
You took that experience and you taught younger people that they can do that, because now they have more years. You had to be at least 18 to be in the Army. Now you're teaching 13-year-olds that the things that you know you can't do, you don't really know that. Right. And you need to get that up here first.
Right.
So the question that I would follow up with is, In your third interview on Gnostic Media with Jan Irvin, I heard you mention these words, trivium and quadrivium, and I thought it maybe is something that was off your radar, but you spoke eloquently about it. And so where do you have familiarity with the trivium and quadrivium, and what does it mean to you?
I went to Jesuit boarding school in third grade, so I'm between the ages of 7.5 and 8.5 years old, and the curriculum, reflecting back on it, which I first began to do 15, 20 years ago, the intellectual diet was not modified in any way for our tender years, and the devices of discipline and motivation that would be used in an authoritarian world, they were not chary of using, but I do believe that their hearts were in the right place. I remember being humiliated. I told you privately about this yesterday, by a Jesuit brother from St. Vincent's College, which is across the street from Xavier Academy, where I went and was beaten on a daily basis by the Ursuline nuns, sometimes for mispronouncing French there. But the brother was talking to us in the middle of the Second World War about the causes of the First World War, and he had written a list of causes on the board. I had a magnificent memory before drink intervened, and he said, could somebody face the back of the room now and tell us all the causes? And I, with my memory, I did, word for word, and he burst into harsh kind of laughter, and he said, you fool, you believed me. He erased the board and said, these are the causes of the war. Now could you do it? And now, chastened, I did, a lot less confidently, and this time the room exploded with his scorn. He did it again. He erased the board. He said, you will never know the causes until you embed yourself into the primary documents and see how complicated a thing this is. That changed my life. I only wish I might have had a second year there, but
before you can form your logical understanding, he said you need to get in check with the knowledge, the actual grammar. What are the artifacts?
Yeah,
where do these things documented? What's primary sources?
And it probably has occurred to other groups, but the intellectual part of the universal Christian religion, the Catholic Church, had a respect for scholarship. And what happens as you collect data is that it forms itself into patterns, and if you record the patterns and test them to see that they hold true, eventually that suggests behaviors. So that they created two formulae, a basic formula which Dorothy Sayers, and I'd urge all your listeners to read her essay, The Lost Tools of Learning. She's a marvelous detective story writer, and the detective stories really aren't genre stories. They're a comedy of manners about the British upper classes, but the trivium was becoming comfortable with a pattern of thinking in which you could dispel confusion.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.